The thing is, the dispute isn't simply Lula against Flávio Bolsonaro. The dispute is whether Brazil will remain a sovereign nation or if we will be bowing to imperialist neo-colonial interests coming from the United States. I think that's exactly what's at stake in the October 4th election, Amaral. Lula against Flávio Bolsonaro, right? It's Lula and Brazil, right? Against the colonialist ambitions of Donald Trump. Guys, look. Someone might think this is an exaggeration, a catchphrase to create political conflict or a conspiracy theory, but let's look at the facts. Trump has been involved in the last elections in Latin America since he started his second term as president of the United States. There were 7 elections. In Latin America, in all 7, the right wing. And they won with direct involvement from Trump. The day after the election in Colombia, Trump himself made a statement saying, "My next challenge is Brazil." So look, it's not us who are saying this, accusing Trump of trying to interfere in Brazil's elections and democracy. It's Trump himself. In this case, by his own admission, saying, "I want to intervene in the Brazilian political process." And what I think we have to point out, and this campaign will have to discuss, Amaral, is why Trump wants to intervene. It's not because of Bolsonaro. It's not simply out of ideological loyalty to the Brazilian far right. I'd say that's the least important issue. Trump wants to interfere in the Brazilian election because he wants the rare earths, the critical minerals from our country. He wants Brazil's riches to process them in the United States and generate wealth in the United States. That's no secret to anyone. Why did he interfere in the Peruvian election? Because he wanted the copper. Why did he interfere in the elections in Bolivia and Chile? Because he wanted the lithium. And why does he want to interfere in the Brazilian election? Because he wants the critical minerals and the rare earths. By the way, I highly recommend that everyone from the progressive side carefully read the United States National Security Strategy and Defense Policy published in December of last year. By the way, there's a section called the Trump Corollary of the Mura Doctrine. It's an official document from the U.S. Department of State and Department of Defense. The Trump Corollary of the Mura Doctrine, where they state exactly that the policy for Latin America will be aimed at restoring historical influence. In other words, the backyard theory, Mura Doctrine, and America for Americans. And more than that, to be able to satisfy the U.S. economy with raw materials and critical minerals that, in the context of a Cold War with China, they don't get from China. Look, our role in this is strategic. Rare earths. We talk a lot about rare earths, and sometimes it sounds abstract. Rare earth is a mineral, right? Actually, they are minerals, to be more precise, made up of 17 chemical elements which are essential for the production of 2 driving forces of the 21st century economy. To drive the digital economy, because it's with rare earth elements, with neodymium magnets. Neodymium is used to produce the most advanced microchips and semiconductors, which are the foundation of data processing for artificial intelligence. And it's through rare earths that solar photovoltaic panels and wind energy turbines are also produced, which are part of the energy transition, which is the second pillar of the 21st century economy, the digital economy and the energy transition. And what's the detail here? China has 49% of the world's rare earth reserves. Brazil is in second place with 23%, and keep in mind that the Geological Survey of Brazil hasn't even surveyed the entire territory yet, so it could be more. And the United States has less than 1% of the reserves. India is in third place with 7.8%, about a third of Brazil's share. So that's what's at stake, folks. So he wants these strategic elements. What did Lula say? And it's important for us to understand why chemistry ended, because there was a way of chemistry. The key moment was when Trump wanted to negotiate so he could take over Brazil's rare earth elements and critical minerals. Lula negotiated in a frank, open way, saying that we sell rare earth to you, Trump. We sell it to China, Europe, and anyone interested, with one condition. We will process and refine it in Brazil, add value in Brazil, and we sell it the way China sells, the way everyone sells, but with technology transfer and adding value in Brazil. It was after the Brazilian government said that Trump went back, attacked, and slapped 2 more tariffs on us. So we have to understand what's at stake in this election. What's at stake is not Lula against Flávio Bolsonaro. It's not that simple, especially because if it were, I think the election would be much easier, because there's no possible comparison between Lula and Flávio Bolsonaro. On one side, you have the biography and trajectory of the greatest political leader in Brazil's history. On the other side, you have a criminal with a huge rap sheet, who, by the way, was the Bolsonaro family's plan B. Plan A was Eduardo. It was only Flávio because Eduardo ruled himself out with his blunder in the United States. Yeah, Flávio Bolsonaro, if you ask him, look, what is his plan for Brazil? I mean, what does he have to say about the public health system? What does he have to say about public education? What does he have to say about family farming? What does he have to say about culture? He doesn't have anything. He's a hollow candidate. It's a desert of ideas. That's what Bolsonaro is. He can't even bring up the historical themes of the far right. The far right always tries to attack the left by talking about corruption. Nobody thinks that Flávio Bolsonaro has any moral authority to talk about corruption. The guy from the Vorcaro audio. The far right always uses the issue of public safety, the Bukil model. The guy was connected to the militias in Rio de Janeiro. What is he going to say about organized crime? What makes this election a war and a very difficult election? So there's an escalation. And let's be honest, President Lula is currently the bastion of resistance to this escalation on our continent. Lula is now leading the democratic camp internationally and progressive in resisting Donald Trump's imperialist ambitions. And again, this isn't just us saying it out of fanaticism. It was on the cover of the New York Times last year. It showed Lula on the cover saying, the only statesman who stood up to Trump. We had European statesmen who knelt down, and many of them came from countries much more powerful, both militarily and economically, than ours. And Lula said, not here. I will not negotiate our sovereignty. So that's what's at stake in the October election. Look, you can't doubt anything. You can't doubt the firepower of these people, because what's at stake is a lot of interests. On one side, the national interest, on the other, the colonial interest, and a lot of economic interest too, right? You see, one of the demands that the United States put on the table in talks with Brazil was not to get into the issue of regulating big tech companies. And here we have to understand the issue beyond the political debate we have every day, which is also important. Big tech companies make money from this. Meta's profitability. 98% of Meta's revenue last year came from ads, paid ads, boosting. If you implement regulation and control, a portion of those boosts is related to weapons. A portion of those boosts is related to sexualization. A portion of those boosts is connected to political hate communities. A portion of those boosts is fake news. If you implement regulation and filtering on what can or cannot be boosted, right? And you set, let's say, a limit for the Wild West, the digital environment has become, they charge money for that too. So there is an economic interest from the big platforms in this. Acting beyond just political interests. And this political interest is connected to the economic one. Why? Because who was able to block the fake news bill back in 2023, 2025? Who managed to block it? It was the far right, accusing it of censorship in a coalition they formed with the big techs at that time. So this is the background that without a doubt concerns us and will be on the agenda.